And that's how I ended up with stitches.
I didn't know you had stitches.
Oh, did you not hear this story?
No.
I feel like maybe we should turn the podcast off with the story because I don't want it to ever end up. Well, no, everyone else sees no. So
I can crop it out. I'll take it out. I'll add it to a blooper reel that we sent out.
Don't go just do riding, guys.
No.
So second last night, and we were staying in this barn in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And the stairs in the Netherlands are so steep.
Yeah,
like a
I
ladder.
think I have heard.
It's like this.
Yeah.
And I got to go to the loo, and I missed the top step. I went straight to the bottom.
On your face.
I don't know. I honestly, it was dark, and I must have, blacked out when I hit the floor. And then the next thing I remember is knowing that I'd got up to go to the loo, so going to the loo.
Yeah.
And then everyone knocking on the door, Alex, are you okay? Are you okay? Because all they heard was thump.
For anyone who's still listening and is confused with what happened, I'm here with a very tired, if quote-unquote not hungover.
Not hungover at all!
Alex Van Randen. He's just come back from Student Rider Nations Cup finals in Belgium.
In Belgium.
And we are going to talk a bit more about that in a subsequent episode. So if you want to get involved in the wild stories that we just had.
I feel like now all my credibility is just
probably don't tell your parents.
My parents know.
Their parents. Your parents are
yeah. Yeah, they kind of had to have the story when I turned up with the stitches. Yeah. So today's episode is going to be on fitness, and with the winter hopefully coming to an end soonish.
So we're here to talk about fitting. So you guys can get your horses fit for camps or competitions or whatever you happen to be doing this summer. Going galloping on beaches into the sunset.
Camp.
Yeah, camp mainly. Let's be honest.
So the first thing that you need to do with your horse before you start getting it back into work, we're working on the basis here that your horse has done nothing, had 2 months in the field.
Been in the
chilling.
field over Christmas, had a nice holiday.
So you're probably already doing all this with your horse. And if your horse is already in work but want to step it up, you just need to find the relevant stage, work level, and just go from there. Yeah. So the first things you need to do with your horse, you need to check that its vaccinations are up to date. So that's your flu and tetanus. Ideally, you don't want to let them lapse because otherwise
then you have to redo the starter. What, 3 vaccinations is it for flu jabs?
Yeah, I think it's 1 and then a month later another one, and then 6 months later another one.
And it's such a pain, and they get really annoyed if you're going competing and you don't have them. They're getting really tight on it now, aren't they?
Yeah, especially with pony club. So make sure you check.
Yeah.
Because I think last year was the first year they checked the passports at areas, and this year you're not going to be allowed to compete.
No.
I think.
No, you'll be eliminated. And they're really upping how much they are checking. I mean, last year it was really touch and go as to whether they found you. I didn't have my passport checked.
So you say
which is lucky because I don't think my horses with jabs are up to date.
Every single horse at Mounted Games areas had their passports taken in and checked at the secretaries.
Oh my god.
Yeah, every single one.
I don't think ours were that strict. But then I don't think we had a vet who was being... We did spot checks, so random horses were checked. Not mine, thank God. But and they definitely check at nationals or anything big you're going to, so you make sure that's all up to date.
Yeah. Next thing, make sure your horse's worming is up to date.
We do. I mean, this one you can play a bit by ear. Our horses are all fecal egg count tested, so we've had no eggs seen for years and years. So we only worm for tapeworm. That's it, and that's only when we're told to by intelligent worming. Good plug for intelligent worming.
Yeah, we don't only really turn out in the summer. Yeah. So we don't worm as much. Yeah. Because there just isn't really, they don't graze enough to get worms.
That's fair enough.
Next thing is teeth. Yeah. I'm going to get them checked, especially if your horse has had a couple of months off in the field. Yeah. You need to make sure that they're happy in their mouth before you start putting a bit in.
You definitely need it checked if they're around the kind of 6-7 age, because that's when they start developing hooks on their teeth, and you really don't want that to be uncomfortable. That's not going to be fun for you or them to deal with when you're riding, trying to get them fit again. The next thing you need checked is their shoes. Having just begged my farrier to come out this week because my horse's shoes are dire. They haven't been done since October.
Oh my god.
Yeah. She hasn't done a lot of road work, so they're fine, but they definitely need doing. And it is worth having a little check and just making sure that you haven't left them too long. They are still on your horse's feet.
And then maybe give them a bit of a tidy up.
Yeah.
So you might want to do manes, give a tail a trim, take feathers. Because also if your horse has been in the field, if you do feathers, you can see if they've had mud fever.
Yeah. They probably look a bit feral. It's better to do a bit now, and then it's worth not clipping until they've been in work a few weeks. Because if you clip the minute you first get on, they'll be wild, and you'll be wearing seatbelts for the next few weeks. So, and it also, something that was pointed out to me the other day that I hadn't really appreciated because my horse is so laid back. If you don't clip them, then it's really obvious to tell if you're working them too much too soon, because obviously they get really sweaty.
Yeah.
So if you don't clip them, it means you pace yourself more, because obviously when you're getting them fit, you don't want to do too much too quickly, because then you'll injure them. So if you keep them unclipped for a little bit, say like first month or so, then it stops you doing that.
Yeah, also you don't need to rug them as much.
Yeah.
See, you say about the seatbelt thing.
Yeah.
Well, Nick decided to get his horses all in and stop their holidays, and then to clip them the next day.
Immediately clip them.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So 2 of them came in from the field and had done nothing for like a month and a half.
Yeah.
And then it was like, cool, let's clip them all and we'll get on them tomorrow. And then we were like, you can get on them.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
We're not doing that. So luckily he got on them first.
Life. Was it worth it? Did they go ballistic?
I don't know, I didn't see.
You buggered off.
Well, to be honest, it was like they worked them reasonably hardish for what they'd done. So actually they were all quite soft and their muscles were a bit floppy, and they were like, oh, work again, this is cool.
Yeah. No, see, my horse is, I think, the only horse I would get straight on, just clip and get straight on, because she's so chill. Touch wood. She was a bit of a cow the other day, to be honest, but most of the time she's so chill. So she was fine. Like before, I had a lesson with Harry Mead in November, and literally she'd been on holiday for a month, and I like dragged her in, clipped her out fully, and was like, "We're going to impress him. Let's go." Poor piglet.
Second last thing to do is to make sure you check your tack, that it fits, because your horse will probably have changed shape a little bit while it's in the field.
It's actually one of the really important things, because they have, like, if you haven't been riding them for anything more than a week, 2 weeks, they've definitely lost muscle. And you know, if you're trying to get them to work all those muscles correctly again, the one thing that's going to definitely stop them is if it's sore, and you don't want them to start with those pressure points and building up the muscle in the wrong way. So definitely get that checked, and make sure you're not over padding or you're not under padding. I mean, so much can be solved by just sticking a polypod underneath the saddle, but make sure it is right and you're not making the problem worse. The last thing you need to check is get the physio out. Just make sure, like I said, you're not making any problems worse or exacerbating anything by work and getting them back into work. They don't need any, I don't know, special stretches or anything. And then you know which muscles need working on the most.
Also, sometimes, so I had a horse that tweaked its back in the field.
Such pain, isn't it?
And it was then half a tenth lame. And the physio came out and she was like, oh, crack. Yeah. And sorted it out, and then the horse was like, I feel fantastic.
I had one who put his pelvis out jumping out of the field. So it'd been really snowy and icy. She tried to jump out of the field, I think slipped on takeoff, and she'd hit the top, the like 120 post and rail fencing. She'd hit and broken the top rail. And then, so I had a couple of weeks off for that, and still wasn't quite right, so we got the physio out, and she literally like lifted up her hind leg, like hoiked it up, and it shoved her pelvis back into the right place. And after that she was absolutely fine and went back to trying to dump me all the time. Nice. Which was lovely. Okay, so we'll start with stage 1. So this is from like your horse has been out in the field, not doing anything, you bring it in, do everything we've just said, and then you're going to start with just doing walk work. So basically getting it used to being back under saddle, really, mostly.
And stretching its legs.
Stretching its legs, getting the skin toughened up under the saddle, so you're not going to give it any rubs. You're going to walk for at least 3 weeks, so doing hacking and road work. So road work's quite good it improves bone density, doesn't it? That's what we talked about last time.
Yeah, so a lot of people that are old school believe that doing road work hardens up the tendons.
Yeah.
But there's no sign, the only science about this is that if you do road work for a prolonged period of time, like you've got roads near your house, you always ride on the roads, then it will improve bone density and it decreases risk of injury due to hard surfaces. Yeah. But you have to always do it. Yeah. You can't just do your 3 weeks of road work at the start of the year and then do nothing
only ride
else.
On surfaces,
Yeah, because then it won't make any difference whatsoever. And you also have to keep doing it, otherwise it decreases. Yeah. So I had an interesting thing this year with my horse, where I moved yards. Yeah. And we've always done a lot of road work and cantered our hacking. Yeah. And she's gone now to a yard where most of it's on surfaces because the roads are quite slippy. You just don't have
access to anything, do you?
Well, there is road work, but the roads are really slippy unless they're wet. Yeah. And so she hadn't done as much this year, and towards the end of the season, one of the fields got opened up.
Yeah.
And Nick had been cantering his horses in it.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if Nick's doing it with his, like, it's obviously not, the
yeah.
ground's fine. So I did 4 lots of 4 minutes interval training with her. And the next day, all her fetlocks were up.
Really?
And warm.
Oh my God. I remember you freaking out.
And I was properly freaked out. And I think it was just because she'd done all her gallop work on a surface.
Yeah.
And then had gone to this slightly bumpy field on a turn. And, like, her legs had, and she's a bit elderly.
Everything had gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. But having known that trotting on roads helps increase bone density, I was talking to a friend who does equine science about it, and she says it does increase bone density and you have to do it all the time, but you only need like 20 minutes trotting on the road. Yeah. So a lot more than that is not good for them because of all the concussion on their legs. I mean, but a little bit is. Although if your only option is trotting on the roads, it's better to go and do that and get your horses fit properly, doing all your trot work and all your walk work, than just to think, oh, it's not good to go and trot them on the roads for hours and hours and just stay in the school. Like, definitely go and do it and fitten them up. And I think, I mean, touch wood, Christ, my horse has been sound. We've had lots of sound horses, and I think it's because we do so much road work and so much, like, varying terrain work. Yeah. So one of the bits of research that Russell Guire from Central Biomechanics was doing was looking at the training methods that promote healthy horses, and one of them was just doing lots and lots of different terrain. So if you're going cantering, do canter on the lumpy bumpy field, because it encourages your horse to adapt, and it gets their tendons and everything used to adapting to everything. So when you go competing and there is an odd bump, it's not a shock to their system, it's just what they're used to, and they can balance themselves for it.
So you want to build this work up over about 3 or 4 weeks, depending on how long your horse had off. Yeah. You want to start with 30 minutes, then go to an hour, then an hour and a half. Yeah. And this is the stage that you don't want to skip on. Yeah. You want to be
as thorough as you can.
As boring as it is, and as cold as it is this time of year, you want to do as much of this as you can. And then towards the end of the 3 weeks, you can start to introduce a little bit of trotting. Yeah. So maybe what you do is if you go on like a half-hour hack and a little bit of a hill or a flat bit, do your trot up there, and that'll be your one for the time. Yeah, and you start with literally like 50 metres, 100 metres, and then build it up slowly from that. Like, you don't just go out and think, all right, today's my trotting day, I'll do half of it trotting and the rest of it can be walking. Like, it has to start literally from like, I'll trot from here to that tree, and that's it. You have to watch at this stage as well, because even if you've checked your tack, if your horse has been out of work, they can get rubs, so they can get like girth galls, the bridle can rub, and something that can help is to treat the areas with surgical spirit, salt water, or witch hazel, and that hardens up the skin. Yeah. And you can also avoid this if you've got lots of horses to get worked. Yeah. You can do a bit of ride and lead. Yeah. So if the sores get a bit bad, you can still get some work into them. Yeah. By doing that.
So I mean, it's not really a fun fact, it's more I don't know, research. So one of the really important things during this stage and kind of into the next stage is that you start getting them to use their muscles correctly, so that you're building the right framework for when you get up to doing the more advanced movements in the school and that sort of thing. And one of the really important muscle groups to work that everyone kind of, once you get to the higher levels, then it's really important, like it's really drilled in, but at the lower levels you just don't really think about it, is their core muscles. And one of the easiest ways to get them to use that is by doing pole work. Because as they have to lift, especially if you can keep them steady and encourage them to lower their head, they have to lift their legs using their core and all the muscles like over their top line and across their back. And also, if you've got a horse like mine whose joints need special attention, then using poles improves joint flexion, because it's one of the only exercises where the increase in flexion doesn't wear off. So the first time your horse goes over the poles, it really like exaggerates picking up its feet, and then the next time it's a bit lower, but once they're used to that level that's a bit lower but gets over the poles, they don't lose it, like it doesn't wear off as they repeat the exercise. And as the flexion muscles get stronger, they then improve flexion when you're not using the poles on the flat. So yeah, poles can also be used to rehabilitate neurological problems. So if your horse has had spinal problems or brain problems, I guess, and problems with motor control, they're really good to help, because they require the horse to coordinate between visual and motor systems in a really sophisticated way, because they have to like lift individual legs and work out how far the pole is and how high the pole is and everything like that. That's my fun fact for that.
So the next stage, well, after you, would probably then be another 3 or 4 week chunk, is you want to start introducing more trotting and extend your exercise up to 2 hours. You want to be walking actively up the hills, which is, I've heard it's really good. So Nicola Wilson, event rider, at her old yard, she used to have a drained riverbank. And as part of her fitness work, she'd walk her horses up and down this bank. Because then they had to learn to adjust to the terrain, and it was really hard work. And I sometimes think with the horses that making them walk up the hills is better for them than trotting, because when they trot, they want to pull themselves up with their front end, but they haven't got that option in walk.
No, exactly. And if they're trotting, like half of the effort is just them kind of throwing the weight up the hill, whereas if you're walking, they have to hold the weight on one, like whatever hind leg is on the floor, so they have more prolonged muscle tension when they're taking the weight on either side. So we do a lot of that as well, especially when they're recovering, because then you're walking, so you don't have that concussion that you do when you're trotting.
And towards the end of this stage, you want to start doing some schooling and introducing some slow canter work. You ideally wouldn't want to go into the school up until this point, because I know if you have a school, I know you think it's quite a big area, but if your horse has been out in the field walking around, a school's going to be quite small, and they won't be as supple at the beginning of the work as they will be by the end of the second stage. My horse, so last year she got kicked in the field and she was fine, but by the time the vets were like, yep, she's all fine to carry on, she'd been cross-tied in her stable for 2 weeks, so literally had not moved one muscle, had been stock still for 2 weeks, and she came back and I honestly thought she'd done a tendon, because she was just like, she was stiff everywhere and she wasn't pushing evenly off both legs. Well, one of her legs is off to the side anyway, so that didn't help. But it was awful, and it was only after about 3 or 4 weeks of solid, constant suppling, constant work, walking up and down hills, everything like that, that I was suddenly like, oh no, okay, she is fine. She's just very, very stiff from having been stood still for a while. It takes a long time, and this bit is the bit where you're kind of starting to make the most progress with your horse, and it takes about 10 days of consistent exercise for the horse's body to become fit to whatever exercise you're doing. So you want to do kind of 10 days of the one step up, and then you want to step it up again to maintain progress and stop your horse just plateauing and becoming fit to whatever you're doing. The third stage and final stage is that you would start to introduce some cantering in a more open area. So this would be, maybe if you've got some nice fields near you or some nice bridle paths, you could start doing that. And also slow hill work, like you were saying, is really good. If you've got a long hill, we used to have a massive hill near us, and you could just trot up it the whole way.
Good, so good. You want to make sure your first canter, because your horses are quite likely to be a bit excitable when they start cantering out in the open. So you want to make sure it's on good going, so the ground's not too hard and not too soft, and you're not going too fast, and maybe wear a neck strap just in case.
You can start to build up the time, the distance of cantering, so the horse improves his breathing and also its blood supply. And this is also, if you're going to start doing eventing or even endurance, this is when you would start maybe bring in your interval training. I've always used the theory that you want to canter every 5th day to improve their fitness. And you can either do the thing where to work out your speed. You can either do that thing where you measure a distance and then know you have to go through it in a minute.
Speed equals distance over time.
Physics. Or what we did was there was an app on someone's phone they had. And I can't remember how they attached it, whether they had one of the running armbands. But you can get a speedometer app.
Can you actually?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
That's how we did it the first time, and we did a speedometer app, and she got it to the speed for novice.
Nice.
As she was going along, and then it was like, cool, stay at this speed, guys, and then you had your stopwatch on that beeped every minute.
Oh my god, we have a circular gallops that a friendly racehorse trainer used, and Mum was just like, how long is it? And they told her in furlongs, so she then had to convert that into metres and work out how long it was going to take me to get round.
And as a general rule, what I would do is I would do 3 lots of 3 minutes for novice, Pony Club Open, and then 4 lots of 4 for intermediate. And to be honest, you know how your horse is reacting to it.
So if you've ever, so at this point, it's really useful to start using gadgets that you get now. So you can get heart rate monitors and all sorts, and they are really, really useful for tracking your horse's fitness and working out how much energy it's actually using per 3 lots of 3 minutes or whatever. And if you've ever measured your horse's heart rate with a monitor, you'll see it jumps around so much. You can jump up and down 20-30 beats a minute easy, and it's because they're prey animals, so their cardiovascular system is designed to jump around really quickly and drop back really quickly. And it's great for when they're trying to survive, because it means they can go from 0 to 60 immediately, and their cardiovascular system can keep up with it, and it doesn't mean that they're then starved of oxygen or whatever, they're galloping away from a lion. But the problem comes for us when you start to cool them down from cross country and stuff. So if you're, like, we've all done it, where you're galloping home, you cross the finish line, and you're screamed at by your trainer because you've just let your horse drop straight to a halt, and it's really, really bad. And it genuinely is really bad. Like, it's not just bad for their muscles and how their muscles seize up after exercise, but if you just let them stop dead, then their heart rate drops too quickly, and they can give themselves really, really bad problems. Like, they can give themselves a heart attack and stuff just because you've stopped too quickly, because it like plummets, and then the systems can't kick in to catch it, so it literally just keeps going down.
Wow.
So yeah, cool your horses down slowly and pull up in a straight line, and make sure you're not doing anything stupid like anything else.
Also, with this stage, we didn't really discuss it, but you would start introducing your jumping.
Yeah.
And towards the end of these 4 weeks, you're probably ready to go out and do show jumping or dressage competition. And depending on how your horse is going, maybe a small low-level one-day event.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. So I mean, I've lost the note on my phone, which is going to really annoy me. My phone's just abandoned half of my notes.
No, notes are life.
I know, they are my life, actually. But so I found a research paper, and I'll try and read it without my notes, or try and remember it without my notes. So it was a research paper looking at the different types of fitness that different horses need. So eventers are really difficult to fitness train because they need everything. So they need dressage fitness, they need show jumping fitness, they need cardiovascular fitness for cross country. So you just want to do everything with them. Dressage horses tend to need to keep their heart rates fairly low. So even when they're competing, most of their work is carried out in the aerobic respiratory range. So the muscles are able to use oxygen as they work. However, because the muscles are used so intensely, so if you think of the effort it takes to put into making half a ton of horse PF for like 10 steps or however many they have to do, the specific muscles are put into anaerobic respiration because they can't keep up with the oxygen demand for that specific amount of time. So the main demands are on muscular fitness, not on cardiovascular fitness. Therefore, when you're doing your basic fitting with them, you want to build on working specific muscle groups like a weight trainer would in the gym. So you start with doing those specific exercises for a really short amount of time and then gradually building them. So show jumping horses, they use aerobic respiration for the cantering between, but the jumping efforts come almost exclusively from anaerobic respiration. So it's big bursts of energy which produce lactic acid. And a study from Holland measured heart rate and blood lactic acid concentration in show jumpers, and it measured it cantering around a course of poles, and then these poles raised into fences. So with fences, the heart rate only increased by 1/6 of what it originally was, whereas the lactic acid concentration was over 4 times higher what it originally was. So your show jumping fitting work should be short duration, intense exercise of like jumping or of flat work, and there's not that much point in getting your horse really, really aerobically fit. So like there's not much point taking it galloping or whatever.
I've also done a little bit of endurance, so I put a bit about endurance horses. I'm afraid if there are any endurance experts out there, I haven't done very, very long distance, but I just thought we should have it in for continuity and variety. With endurance horses, they need to build their stamina up, but it's a different kind of stamina to event horses. Because event horses need to be going a lot faster.
Full energy all the time.
For 10 minutes and jumping fences, whereas endurance horses need to have enough stamina to go, you know, half a day.
Hours and hours and hours.
And they also need to be quite good on their feet. So I found it really helpful to work over different terrain, a little bit like we were saying with working that even if you need to go and hack somewhere, so you go transport somewhere, so you can go on the beach or you can go on sandy soil versus muddy ground. And I also don't subscribe to the walk your horse over tree roots things, because people like don't go over tree roots because your horse needs to learn to pick its feet up. And they need to learn to look where their feet are going, and if they fall over them, they probably won't do it next time. I also think with when you're doing endurance horses that they are very rarely going to compete on a surface, like never. There might be sandy ground, but that will probably be quite deep. And so I would try and do a lot of their canter work in fields if I could, and But on the other hand, you do want to do schoolwork.
Yeah.
Because they've got to carry you for hours, and you need to make sure that their muscles are developed well.
Yeah.
So they're not going to get any strains. And I find pole work's also quite good for this, because it's good with their sure-footedness. Yeah. And it just teaches them to think for themselves.
Yeah. I've had pole work with the youngsters is especially good. And if you can get, I mean, I don't know whether it's a very pony club exercise, but we used to just get a whole load of poles and like throw them out at like different angles, different distances that you don't know what they are. And then if you've got a really, really young horse, like 4, make it walk over them. But if it's a bit older, make it trot over them, and just take it really slowly, but don't help it at all, because it makes them think, and they have to work out where their feet are going. And the first time they'll literally be all over the place and their balance will be completely off. But the second or third time, they begin to adjust their own balance and work out how to carry themselves and you and get through your little maze of poles. It's a really good exercise.
Another discipline that I've added, because I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah. I saw the Instagram post as well.
So racing has had a bit of a reputation for just galloping the horses and seeing how fast they can go, and that's all the work they do. But a few yards have realised that actually doing
the horses do better.
If they do some school work and they're more muscled up. Yeah. And what you said about Instagram, Laura Collette has been doing some jump training on racehorses. Yeah. So
I think it must be so useful, because it means they actually know how to jump properly, as opposed to just hurling themselves over fences.
I feel like it's also more useful for them, because realistically, not every racehorse is going to be a top racehorse, and they're probably going to end up being rehomed and retrained. And if they've had some basics, then it will be easier for them to adjust to a different life. Like if someone's taught them how to come into a fence and jump a bit more nicely, and they've had some basics on balance and working a little bit rounder, then their lives will be so much easier.
Yeah. Speaking of racehorses, that's my favourite fact. Oh my god, it's my favourite fact.
Oh yeah.
If no one else finds this interesting, I'm going to be heartbroken. Okay, so get ready. So, you know how, not many people know this. In humans, athletes can blood dope themselves. So blood doping is when your shady trainer, because it's very, very illegal, kids, don't do this at home. Your shady trainer takes a pint of blood out of a human, leaves the human about a week, and then puts that pint back in just before their competition. So that extra pint is like more red blood cells, it's more white blood cells to fight any infections you have, and the red blood cells carry more oxygen, so your performance like massively increases. And you can't detect it because it's your own blood. Like what are they going to find? Like it's your own blood. Even if you've got high blood pressure, some people have high blood pressure in stressful situations, like a doping test. So like it's untraceable. So this happened in, I think, the 70s and 80s. It was happening a lot in human sport. And there were these shady racehorse trainers who were like, this is amazing, it's untraceable and it really improves performance, let's do this to the horses. So they found their horses, they took out the pint of blood, they waited the week, and then just before the race they put this blood back in and they waited to see the amazing results their horses were going to get, and nothing happened at all. So they decided to look a bit more into it, and they found that horses' spleens, so they're an organ inside their body, horses' spleens hold 16 pints of blood. Humans have, 10 pints of blood, is it?
I don't know.
I think it's 10 pints of blood.
You're the biologist.
I think it's 10 pints of blood that humans have, like, in your body. So horses have nearly 2 humans' worth of blood inside their spleen. And what happens is when they're under stress or they're, like, have a really, really high oxygen demand, that blood is shoved into their circulatory system and they blood dope themselves. Like, they do it themselves, but with 16 pints of blood.
That's such a cool fact.
60. I just think it's the coolest thing ever. These shady racehorse trainers being like, I know, and then going and trying it only to find that evolution had beaten them by like a million years, and also had done it 16 times bigger. I just think it's the coolest thing, Alex. I just think it's the coolest thing I've ever heard, ever.
Evolution is
so cool, right? Everyone's going to be listening like you're insane.
I love that I'm watching you now and you're just like got this gleam in your eye and you're getting so excited for the punchline.
It's really exciting. I think it's so cool.
It's really cool.
The amount of people I've told that and they've been like, yeah? No, you don't understand.
And this is why they are not presenting the podcast.
Cool. I just think it's the best thing ever. That's also why, so horses, the reason I found out is I was doing work experience at a vet's, and they brought this horse in to be a blood donor, and they took 16 pints of blood out of this horse. And I was like, oh my God, why are you taking so much? Like, how's it going to cope? And they were like, oh, their spleen holds 16 pints and that's how much you can take. So they're really, really good at blood donating. Blood donating. They're really, really good at blood donating because they have so much. But you do have to give them time to replenish that. Yeah, they have 6. Oh my God, I just think it's the coolest thing ever. I think it's so cool.
Moving on from Tess's fun fact.
That's my funnest fact. Don't just move on from it. That's it. It's all downhill from here.
Once you've got your horse fit and you've done your season, you want to give your horse a holiday. We're going to go on to roughing off, which means basically what I've just said.
Yeah.
So the thing is, don't just stop riding
from a night
it.
Out, that's what that is.
Don't just stop riding. Don't, do your final competition this season, put your horse in the field.
Turn out a competition fit horse and be
see you in 2 months, because they need time, their body, just to chill a bit.
Yeah.
So you want to reduce their hard feed and work and start increasing their hay and the amount of time they're in the field.
Yeah, just cut down the amount you're riding so they can put a bit of weight on, let their coat grow out so they get a nice insulating layer.
Yeah, some people would take their horse's shoes off when they go on a holiday.
Yeah. Because
then you haven't got the issue of them losing a shoe in the field and then finding the farrier to get back on.
Yeah, you might want to build them up till they're out 24/7. I mean, I know we keep my horse coming in, but that's because she's gets miserable if you leave her out. She thinks you're ignoring her. But I mean, it's so much easier if you can just leave them out.
I think my horse would become feral.
Yeah.
Which is bad enough to catch as it is, I think. You'd come back after 2 months. You'd be like, wait, a human?
Some of them do that. My friend bought a horse from Ireland as a youngster, got it home, turned it out, and they couldn't catch it for 2 weeks. Every time they went to the field, it'd be like...
I don't know why I'm laughing. This happened to me. It's really not a very nice situation to be in.
And you just bought a horse and you're like, I can't get it.
Yeah, my event horse stayed out for I think 2 days once because she was just like, no. God, please.
It was anything funnier than horses just doing that. No, why would I do that? No.
Only when you're watching. Yeah. When it's you trying to catch the horse, it's not funny.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about other methods of working your horses.
Yeah.
So the most obvious one that lots of people have heard of is horse walkers.
Yeah.
The thing with horse walkers is you don't want to use these as a substitute for your first 4 weeks. Because a bit like being in the school, it's on quite a tight turn and there's no variation in the terrain and you're also not riding them. So it doesn't count. Yeah.
And I feel very twitchy about putting horses on horse walkers for longer than 20 minutes because it's all on one rein. You're only working that one side of their body. I don't think it's great for their joints because you're just walking on a circle on one rein. And if you're very careful to make sure you alternate every day, then fine. But quite often people don't, and it stresses me out quite a lot.
So probably only use them for warming up horses and cooling them down. So like if I've galloped my horse, I always put it straight on the walker.
Yeah,
and
so
let her just
have a nice walk
off. And if they're having a day off, want to get them out of the stables, put the leg stretch. Yeah. And if you're mucking them out in the morning, it can be good to put them on there and they've had a little...
And then they're out the stables and you're not trying to shuffle around them.
I always find a little bit with horse walkers, you have to look at your horse as well. So my horse has got quite turned out toes. Yeah. And for the first few years we had her, we didn't want to put her on the walker because she's already putting strain down those legs. It's going to make it any worse. Yeah. On the turn.
Oh, that's really smart. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, that's true.
Well, it was Cheryl's idea, but...
there are loads of new fitness methods that are coming out all the time and they're really improving people's knowledge in like how they're getting their horses fit and like being selective in what they're doing with them. So you can get things like water treadmills, which are really, really good because they build core strength as your horse has to pull its feet through the water. And you can add, some of them have inclines as well that you can add, which increase resistance and like especially if you have one where your horse can drop its head, they can work the top line as well. And then you can have swimming, which is really good for cardiovascular system and muscular system actually, but it can, you don't want to do it too much because of the position the horse has to get in. So where it's lifting its head right up and can encourage it to be really tight across its back into hollow. So it's great for cardiovascular, but great for the muscular system, but you have to be a bit careful about how it's working its muscles. And both are really good for hoof strength as well. Because all the time the feet are in the water, they're absorbing water and moisture. So if you don't put hoof oil before they get in, let them do their water thing, whatever choice you make, for 10 minutes, however long they're there, and then put hoof foil on when you come out because it stops all the water evaporating, and it's really good for their feet. I think that's everything. Have we finished our little syllabus?
I think we have. I think that's all about fitness from Pony Club.
Yeah. Well, I hope you've all learnt something, and I hope you remember my fun fact that I got really excited about because it's so cool.
And if you can be as excited as Tess is about her fun facts about fitness in your exam, you're gonna be fine.
Oh, they'll bloody love you. They'll tell you to shut up almost immediately. I can tell you that for free.
So I hope you've enjoyed it, and tune in the next one, which is going to be about first aid.
Yeah.
And that'll be released.
God knows
soon.
when. Yeah.
Probably straight after this. Actually, it's right at the beginning.
all at once when I'm panicking, like go. All right. Thanks for listening. Bye.